So now that we have completed the LookDev portion of the build, we want to use the hair in animation by connecting it to an animation rig using Maya NURBS curves. So the purpose of this is to use curves to drive the larger masses of hair. In preparation for this, I made some room around the networks because we are going to be adding a lot more nodes to each branch. So to begin this, what we want to do is convert the strands to curves so that we can provide them to the rigging team. Now, we only want to convert the grooms that will be used in animation. In the case of, say, the eyebrows or the eyelashes, the movement will be driven by the surface itself, so we can leave those behind. So let's begin with the base groom. Now, what we need to do is select the groom node and go into the Yeti menu, convert groom to curves. And what we want to do is select and group. So if we unhide the groom, we have a one-to-one conversion. The way that we're going to be connecting the curves into the Yeti network is through selection sets. So what we want to do is properly name the curves and then create a selection set for it. I want to talk about what's in the hair group. I organized all the pieces. So we have the hair growth geo, the Yeti nodes in its own group, and then the groom nodes separated by the mullet groom nodes and the face groom nodes. Now let's go back to renaming the set of curves. I'm just going to run this. I'm going to name it base. So let's do this for the rest of the grooms that we're going to be using in the animation setup. What we're going to want to do now is take these groups of curves, duplicate them, one for the FK setup and another one for a dynamic hair setup. So what I'm going to do is select the curves and create a set. And let's name this set effects base guide curve group. Oh, curve set. And one thing that Yeti does is it creates a selection set of the guides that it converted. I don't normally use these sets, so I just create my own. Now what we have is a selection set for each curve group. So at this point, what we should do is export these curves, and it'll carry over the selection set information if you export with history. Now that we've handed off the curves, we can continue our setup. So what we're going to do is connect the curves to the network by use of the guide node. We want to create an import node first, change the type to guides, and let's start with the FK base guide set. We want to name it FX base guide import. And we connect the import into the second input of the guide node. The guide node needs fibers. So let's convert strands to fibers. It needs a geometry into its second input. Make it the root. I'm going to go ahead and hide the curves. And what we're seeing is the strands as fibers. So now what we're going to do is take those fibers and connect them into the guide node. When we go into the guide node, there's a slight shift. Yeti adds an attribute to the curves that will determine how the fibers are attracted to the guides. By default, the values of the inner radius and outer radius are 0 to 2. So what we want to do is match the inner radius with the outer radius so that there is no fall off. We have to do this for each guide curve. So what we want to do is reduce the inner and outer radius. So I'm going to use a value of 0.05. The fibers and the guides should be on top of each other, so a lower value should work. Now we can see that the fibers are matching the guides. So now what we want to do is convert the fibers back to strands. Now we'll plug in the strands that are going through the guide node into the comb node's strand input. So what we should see now is nothing different. And we can verify this by duplicating these comb nodes and plugging in the strands directly. So this is what we had originally, and this is what we have now with the guides. No difference, which is what we want to see. Perfect. So we're maintaining the groom, but now we have it connected to curves that we can now test to make sure that everything's working properly. What I normally do is take the curves and add a cluster deformer. And if the setup works, once we deform the curves, the hair should follow. We're seeing that the hair is deforming, and what's happening here is that we've moved the influence of the strands away from its origin. So the fibers now have no indication of what shape they should take. So if we bring this back, it reattaches to the guide. Now let's connect the dynamic curves. So we can copy and paste. And point it to the dynamic base hair guide set. So what we want to do is be able to switch between guide sets. So what we're going to use is Yeti's switch node.